I just think like the innovation can happen so fast in DeFi versus what has traditionally happened in CeFi. I think that's why we're not at a tipping point right now. We're like beyond it, and this is where like I think the sky is the limit as far as bringing new and innovative financial products to market in DeFi. I'm blown away.
Hey guys, this is episode 14, and today we're going to cover some super buzzy topics. We've got Solana, DeFi, a bit of Web3. I'm joined with Greg Kidd and Jun Hiraga. Greg, as you all know, co-founder and CEO of GlobaliD, and Jun, along with Greg, a co-founder and partner at Hard Yaka Ventures. At this point, everyone knows Greg, but Jun, do you want to take a little time to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Jun Hiraga, and I've known Greg since college. We actually used to race bikes for Brown, and have ridden and raced ever since, and we kind of kept up since college. Riding. I spent most of my career on Wall Street, first as a risk trader, and then I ran institutional equities for a couple of investment banks on the West Coast for a number of years. And then in 2017, I came over into Greg's ecosystem to help out in any way that I can, and I still feel like that is my general role. However, in the last couple of years, I've been spending all of my time on the investment fund Hard Yaka, and we are right now embarking on some. We're looking at some really cool projects and really focusing on Web3, DeFi, sort of the plumbing pipes of NFTs and blockchain infrastructure. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing right now.
Since we're going to be talking about Solana, Greg, do you want to start off by, telling the story of how you met Anatoly, as we should say, Hard Yaka is a first investor in Solana, hold a lot of Solana tokens. So how did that happen?
Sure. We met Anatoly at at sort of the big heyday of the 2018 run-up. He had an idea for building a faster and cheaper blockchain. It was based on the concept of proof of history. He had a white paper. He had a Russian accent, said he was from the Soviet Union. We liked it. We wanted to get involved. It was actually tough to write the check because by the time it was check writing time, it was crypto winter, and a lot of folks had shrunken balance sheets, including us. And I think we stingily wrote a check for like $100,000, and that was a first round token round. I think that was at the 4-cent price, and so we did end up with what is today about 1/3 of the active. 1% of the active float, and have been sort of exciting enthusiasts ever since, both as an investor, but really we're really interested in the blockchain because a lot of our portfolio companies want to use it because it is fast and cheap.
Awesome. And do you want to talk a little bit about that value proposition in terms of its speed, throughput? Obviously we're seeing issues with Ethereum these days in terms of high gas prices. People are talking about building decentralized applications and social media and stuff. It seems like Solana is sort of primed for that next chapter of development.
Sure. I mean, the Solana speed is undeniable. It is reliably operating at 50,000 transactions per second. It's talked that it could theoretically go up to something in the 700,000 transaction range. The cost at a time when Ether prices are $50 or over, Solana being like fractions of a penny, make it the ideal choice for something that's going to be like a high volume trading type or marketplace application. And we know that the Ethereum community is much larger in terms of the amount of capital that's locked up in contracts, but Solana is small but growing, is actually, I believe, processing more transactions per day than Bitcoin and Ether combined, and is attracting a healthy developer community. It's still small relative to Ethereum, but it looks like to us that something's there.
Right. And recently at the Breakpoint conference, Anatoly was on stage saying, theoretically, he's an ambitious guy. Theoretically, the speed of light is the theoretical limit of what they can do. So fast and cheap, that was the message.
Fast and cheap.
It's a bit tougher to develop on top of on Solana because it uses a very like a sort of a lower level language called Rust, which kind of works counterintuitive to the way most folks that have been dealing with Ethereum. But when we asked other coders, they said, yeah, it was hard, except the Russians said it's not that hard.
Yeah, so Anatoly likens the experience, the developer experience, as eating glass. And when he was on stage at kicking off the conference, he must have said eating glass, 5 times. So there's a lot of pain to create this elegant solution network.
Sure. So getting to that, the two of you have spent quite a bit of time in the last few months traveling. A lot of that time spent in Europe. You were at Money 2020 Europe. Most recently in Portugal with Web Summit and culminating in Solana Breakpoint. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about your learnings from those trips?
Well, I think the big learning point, and this was even at Money 2020 Europe, which is typically a kind of a more stuffy, banker-driven versus FinTrack, and certainly not a Web 3.0 world. But my gosh, those folks have bought into the concept that identity in the future will be self-sovereign, that DeFi is not coming, but it's here. It's just small, nascent, but it's here. And it's no longer being talked about as an over-the-horizon event. So at that conference in particular, at the London conference, Token 2049, I'm seeing a situation where folks in Europe are, for the first time, in my opinion, ahead of thinking and openness to the folks in the United States and Asia. So really, really odd time to see Europe moving into, from our point of view, the lead in terms of thought leadership and really just numbers of projects that are going and getting off the ground.
Why do you think that is, Europe sort of being a step ahead right now?
Well, it probably didn't help that China just made everything illegal and the U.S. is going around in Tony Soprano style, shaking folks down for doing anything. So, you're in a U.S. situation where, Coinbase is getting a Wells notice, which is basically a threat to sue from the SEC for even thinking about offering yield on crypto accounts. And obviously the situation with the SEC and Ripple and a bunch of other crypto asset yield companies like Nexo and Celsius are receiving cease and desist orders, even from states where they don't operate. Everybody's getting in the U.S. on beating up on the innovators in the crypto space. And so there's also talk of regulation of making stable coins only being able to be issued by banks. There's talk about regulating non-custodial parties that facilitate the creation of DeFi. All these things look like storm clouds. Now, for us, we're expecting all these industries to have to be compliant anyway. So all that thunder is, if it leads to lightning and you actually have to be compliant, that's okay by us. But it's right. Really, the issue right now is nobody knows who's going to get shaken down by which regulator at any point in time. And that situation in the U.S. plus the outright ban in China make Europe like the only hot dog stand that's still in business, even if it's rather bureaucratic. You can still get a hot dog in Europe.
So John, you've spent quite a bit of your career on Wall Street, at a big bank. For me, one of the cool things about crypto and watching its development is see it sort of recreate a lot of these traditional financial markets on chain, or even with these sort of centralized exchanges and services, etc. DeFi is this whole different beast, right? That's something we've never seen before. Given your perspective from traditional markets, like how are you viewing this development?
Right. I'm kind of blown away by what we're learning about in DeFi, just because we actually had a teach-in yesterday, and we were learning about how on Solana, there are other projects are being built on top of it. For instance, Serum, which is enabling order books, and it's a decentralized exchange. And then on top of that, other projects are being built on top of that, which are effectively just bringing new financial products to life here. And it's just code, and it's all composable. Therefore, I just think like the innovation can happen so fast in DeFi versus what has traditionally happened in CeFi. I think that's why we're not at a tipping point right now. We're like beyond it, and this is where I think the sky is the limit as far as bringing new and innovative financial products to market in DeFi. I'm blown away.
Right, and not just the innovation, but the fact that people like me, normal people, can actually have access to that innovation,
right,
which is
right.
really cool to see.
That's the really cool thing that we've been talking about, and what we envision, that when you have an identity, everybody has a global identity, GlobaliD. With it comes that non-custodial wallet, and if you have that non-custodial wallet, then you have access. So everybody in the world effectively will be able to have access if they have an identity, and that's something we've never seen. So also with DeFi, it's not only will people be able to access the financial markets and hold assets, they'll also be able to earn a return on those assets. So, in effect, not only are we enabling access to the financial markets, but people will finally be able to earn something on those assets, and that's something that only the privileged have been able to experience, pretty much. So I think that's pretty revolutionary.
So building on that, and also what Greg was speaking earlier about in terms of regulatory headwinds in the U.S., just about a week or so, the SEC released this statement from Commissioner Carolyn Crenshaw. For example, a variety of DeFi participants' activities and assets fall within the SEC's jurisdiction as they involve securities and securities-related conduct. But no DeFi participants within the SEC's jurisdiction have registered with us, though we continue to encourage participants in DeFi to engage with the staff. And this sort of echoes, Gary Gensler, SEC chief. He's very careful with his words, but he's been very vocal about regulating DeFi. One of the questions that we were talking about with Vadim the other day is what does compliance look like in a decentralized world? And maybe, Greg, for you, this is also an opportunity to talk about some new terms that you've come up with or learned recently, like green DeFi and ZFi, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's the first time we heard at the Breakpoint conference. ZFi means DeFi, but in a regulatorily compliant way, but using zero knowledge proof, so it can still be privacy preserving. Okay, because you could be compliant and shred privacy, but there's this concept that you could be both compliant and still protect privacy, and so that's the dream. But there's still, you talk about the SEC saying, "Come on in and have a chat." I've had some of those chats, and usually I leave there with a bit less clothing than I went in with. And sore in some unmentionable spots. And so it'd be one thing if they said, "Come on in and let's talk about the rules," but they're saying come on in, and they're not clarifying the rules. And so they're basically telling you to kind of like unzip yourself, and then they'll figure out like how much they want to take out of what you got. And so it hasn't really been a two-way street. It's without rules, without clarity. It's basically still a shakedown environment. It's regulation by enforcement rather than regulation by rules or principles. And that leaves everybody just running scared. And the interagency fight, between who gets to sue. You've got a situation where these DeFi lenders are essentially looking to be regulated. Currently, if they have like a license, they have like a money transmitter license. And so you got like state money transmitter license operators issuing, cease and desist notices to essentially global lenders. And that's just crazy town. I mean, that would be something that should be regulated by the OCC, but the SEC, the CFTC, the CFPB, and the state regulators are all trying to get a piece of the action. And really the innovators are just caught in the crossfire, just like, citizens of a city get caught in the crossfire between drug lords having a drug war in a city where distribution hasn't been resolved yet. And so independent of all the principles about how DeFi should be regulated, it's just basically a bureaucratic shit show of different agencies fighting with each other to be the boss of who gets to say.
So obviously, that challenge is going to continue. How do you see this getting resolved? Like what are the sort of solutions, right? For, with DeFi, you have a non-custodial wallet, you have a private key. Like how do you do KYC with something that's completely decentralized?
Well, you can still do KYC because people as individuals can go out and get an identity. They can get the same identity credentials they can get in the custodial world. The question is, if somebody sets the procedures and say, well, that's enough or that's not enough, who are you going to put the screws down? Are you going to put the screws down on a creator of a non-custodial wallet? Are you going to put it down on a company that provides staking? Historically, those firms haven't held assets, and therefore they've not had a regulator. But if you're going to say now any form of facilitation of this new form of finance creates a regulatory nexus, well, that's virgin territory, but a number of rumblings have suggested that's where we're going to go, but that still doesn't resolve of who gets to knock you on the head. And so that mystery is still there. I don't think Congress is going to provide clarity. And so right now you're going to have to answer to potentially multiple regulators telling you to do various and sometimes inconsistent things. But that's the state of the world. I don't really anticipate that changing for the duration of the Biden administration. It's not a Biden thing or a Trump thing. It's just a bureaucrats versus everyone else kind of thing. And that's the state of the world in the U.S. I mean, Europe is only marginally better, and Europe is fragmented. There's not an overall crypto regulation framework for Europe. There's just individual states deciding to punk you if you do something in their country, like Germany not liking fractional equities or too much leverage. They'll just tell you to get out of town, which is still not a substitute for a regulatory regime of clear rules. They're just objecting to particular products, and the crypto companies that were operating and offering those projects just beat a hasty retreat.
So bringing it back to the innovators for a second, I think one of the things that's been really special about Solana is how it's been able to attract so much developer enthusiasm. What did you guys see at Breakpoint? And any compelling projects, any hints of trends of where things are going?
Great parties.
I had heard that the this is only the second Solana conference, and the amount of interest and then the number of developers was had exploded. I heard something like 570 teams presented at the hackathon, and I think Anatoly and Raj were really pleased with that, and with the attendance there. we sat in on a number of we saw a lot of panels, and there were a lot of interesting projects, ranging from anything from learning about Serum to Mango, which provides like margin trading, to what else did we see?
We liked Audius, which is a distributed Spotify service. Most of the people that have signed up for that, they don't even know that it's a distributed platform. And so you're seeing the recreation of things that we're used to having in the regular CeFi world in DeFi. And again, it's still really early, but clearly there's like a parallel universe evolving to re-implement everything we've been used to having in a CeFi world, in a DeFi world, and just basically cutting the intermediaries out.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of
guess,
focus on the developers trying to make products that try to abstract sort of what's really kind of going on underneath the hood, and it just make it a better user experience. I think like the Phantom wallet, I think they observed what some of the challenges are with using a MetaMask wallet and are trying to improve upon that. And we heard that across the board on some of these projects. They're just trying to make things easier to use and for the user. And I don't think that the user will even know like what's going on underneath all that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've been in this space for a long time, and I still find a lot of this stuff intimidating. So, for that next step of mainstream use, I think we'll need that. So I guess, given all of your guys' learnings from the last few months, like what are you focused on the most now going forward, whether from, an investing perspective or a building perspective?
Well, we, and not we alone, are going to begin to curtail our investing in sort of the legacy CeFi world. I mean, we still have a lot of investments. We still think there's a lot of money to be made there, but it's a lot more fun, and we think we're in a much earlier position to be in DeFi, in Web 3.0, creator economy, NFTs, DAOs, anything that's working at that level. There's probably oversubscription and a lot of froth in the market, but that frankly seems to be like where the action. That's like where the other top shops are hiring up and trying to get smart. It's where the developer interest is. So even though DeFi is probably where crypto was 8 years ago, probably less than a million active users. I think that the amount that's locked up is like $250 million, and less than a tenth of that is on Solana. We're really at the very bottom of the first inning for this. So, but we're all in on this new space. We'll continue to be interested in identity and payments and whatnot, but we're much more interested in identity and payments that are facilitated by decentralized protocols versus centralized platforms. So it's really protocols versus platforms, and we've drunk the Kool-Aid on the protocol view of the world.
Yeah, just to echo what Greg said. I mean, it's fun. I mean, this is the most interesting stuff to be looking at, and it's also cool for me to be witnessing this, because if you're walking around that conference, like first of all, there's a huge sense of community there, and everybody feels like they're part of something new and unique and sort of revolutionary. And for me to be with Greg, who has seen this in having gone through Bitcoin, it does just, it's great to be in at a very, very early stage, and that's exhilarating.
It certainly feels like a movement. Greg, I like that distinction you made between protocols versus platforms. Is that sort of the distinction you see between Web 3 and Web 2?
Absolutely. These protocols are distributed, they're decentralized, and there's nobody in charge. Now, there might be people taking leadership, but that's a lot different from owning, the underlining rails. And so, again, we were in it, kind of Coinbase and Robinhood and, a lot of these other sort of CeFi powerhouses. But once you see it possible to do these same functions and more, globally, at scale, at a cheap price, and with good speed, you're kind of like, you got that feeling of like, well, hey, there's AOL and CompuServe over here, and there's this thing called the World Wide Web. And it was interesting. I had one of my dinners when I was over there was with Tim Berners-Lee, who's, the creator of the World Wide Web, and, which was kind of cool, but, we felt like, man, that's kind of like the old thing now. This is kind of the new thing. And no disrespect to him or, all the efforts that led to the World Wide Web, but we feel like this is something that's going to be not just as big, but bigger. And so, and look, it wasn't just for like DeFi implies financial services. We see people there that were from like the gaming community, from the art community. And when you're going to one of these parties, I kind of was kidding about the parties. The most interesting thing about the parties is you have this incredibly diverse group of people, but they all have that same inkling in their eye that, oh my gosh, there's a new sheriff in town. It's a protocol, and we're not all beholden to this platform. We're not on some platform where someone's going to pull the rug out from under us. And that feels very empowering, and also very integrated, because the protocol works across all those segments, whether it's the metaverse or art or financial services and, or governance, all these new governance rights, these social tokens, this ability to like organize even a censorship resistant world in the space of social media. All this seems powered and enabled by this overriding thesis about Web 3.0, and the usual gatekeepers, the toll keepers, are no longer the bosses of this. The cat is out of the bag. And when you look at the founders of Solana, they're not controlling all this. They got a seat at the table, spectators like the rest of us. Although we can all contribute to making it go forward, it's but different from being a contributor to being a controller. And it's pretty fun being a contributor, and it's kind of a bummer being a controller. It feels like wearing a suit that's 2 sizes too small. So we like this new world.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the most interesting panels, listening to the developer from Solana talking about the importance of staking. And, we've done that, but we've done it through sort of these infrastructure, blockchain infrastructure companies like Blockdaemon and Figment. And now, having listened to that and really bought on to the importance of being, part of that decentralized network and contributing to it, that's really meaningful. And I think that, we're strongly considering, spinning up our own node separate from those providers and contributing to the network. So
yeah, it feels like it's both a right to do it, but also a responsibility to do it. And so, it's a more active vision of the role that you play, and you get rewarded for it. And in a world where yields are as high as they are versus the legacy world where yields are for shit, you kind of feel like a chump if you don't do it. In the world where you have like low yields and inflation is picking up, if you're not in this new world where you're staking for yourself and contributing to the protocol and getting rewarded for it, you kind of feel like a chump. And and I'm humble enough to admit that I've been the chump before at the table, and probably the chump too compared to some of the youngsters that really know how to crank this stuff. But we'd rather be getting in the lifeboat with them than staying on the Titanic. Even though the Titanic was pretty damn flash till it went down.
Well, I think that is why there's so much buzz and excitement right now in this space, right? Especially with also some of the disappointments of Web 2, it really does feel like we're at the beginning of something new and special. And any final thoughts for our listeners, viewers?
I guess when's Breakpoint for next year. That'll be interesting. I think that we really want to see this year, 2021, not next year. This year is the year that it happened, and it's no more talking about the future. The future is now. So, just I would not have said this or thought this even 6 months ago. I would have thought that DeFi was a bit faddish and whatnot, but now I don't see any other way that we're going to get to the future except through this pathway, and it's a great time to be young again.
Yeah, I think we learned a lot from having been there and listening to everybody that's working on these cool projects, but it really inspired me to hunker down, and there's so much more to learn, and I'm really excited to sort of chip away at that. As long as much as we're at the beginning of this and it feels really early, and if you look at some of the charts, like some of the explosive growth on Solana, it's not going to be a single straight trajectory upwards. I know there's going to be we're going to have ebb and flow, but I'm sure there's going to be regulatory headwinds with DeFi, but I think all of that is going to be healthy and something that we need to work through, and at the end we're going to end up with something much more useful and just better.
We're all in.
Sounds good. All right, we'll end on that. Thank you all, and we'll see you on the next one.
Very good. Thanks, Alec.